Hello and thanks for joining me. It's a beautiful summer's day here and I'm out enjoying a ride on my Triumph Scrambler 1200. What I've just been thinking about and what I want to talk about today is the fact that motorcycling is inherently a risky activity and how we deal with that as a society and how we deal with risk and risky activities generally as a society, because I think I have certainly in my own lifetime seen a huge change in this, and I think this, the changes and attitudes towards risk more generally in society are reflected in motorcycling. And I don't think these changes are necessarily all positive or healthy. So that's what I want to unpick and talk about in a little bit more detail. So if you live in a developed Western country, then the chances are that you live in a society that is increasingly obsessed with safety. And motorcycling, along with most other activities, is being dragged along with this this social change, this social trend. So we are seeing ever tightening legislation on motorcycle manufacturers for safety features such as, for example, ABS, traction control, day running lights. Now we're seeing things like, radar-controlled braking systems. And we're also seeing changes in motorcycle clothing as well. So I remember when I started riding, you used to go out in a pair of stout boots, a pair of jeans, denim jeans, and a leather jacket. Whereas, and this is not, I'm not saying that this is a bad thing, I'm just commenting on the changes, that we're seeing changes in motorcycle clothing, but also increasing legislation on what we must wear on motorcycles. And so, around the world, so for example, in some states in America, eye protection is compulsory, helmets are compulsory in many places. I think in France, C-rated gloves are required. And then, we're seeing pushes certainly through things like insurance. So people in the event of an accident won't be fully covered for insurance if they're not wearing things like C-rated body armour. And then we're seeing the advent of things like inflatable air jackets as well. So more and more safety features, both on motorcycles and in the clothing that we wear. So this increasing obsession with safety. Again, I'll just reiterate, I'm not saying this is necessarily all a bad thing, I'm just commenting on the change. But along with this, we are seeing another social change, and that is an increasing trend of an attitude towards motorcycling as being an unnecessarily dangerous activity. Many young people, the younger generation, are socialised these days into being hyper safety conscious and to see themselves as vulnerable, and then to automatically avoid a danger and to avoid taking risks. Now, obviously, I'm not against improving the safety of motorcycles and motorcycle clothing. But I am against some of the compulsion of these things, the choice being taken away from you, and I discussed this removal of choice in a recent video I did about compulsory helmets. But there is an important factor here, and the problem is with this, being so safety conscious, this focus on avoiding danger, is that it is stifling to the human condition. And it can even lead to mental illness in the form of stress and fear and depression. And I'm convinced that one of the main reasons that motorcycling is less popular amongst younger people than amongst my generation is that most young people have been socially conditioned into seeing motorcycling as being too dangerous and therefore as something that they should avoid. At the same time, I look around at my friends, and I think there is no coincidence that many of my motorcycling friends are ex-military. These are people who have been exposed to danger and have taken risks, and some have suffered life-changing injuries, but they continue to ride motorcycles. And something which I covered in one of my earlier videos is that, it's well known that much of the motorcycling culture that we have at the moment, certainly in the USA and in the UK and across Europe, arose after the Second World War, when young men were returning from war, where they had been exposed to extreme danger. And again, we saw resurgence and changes in the USA after the Vietnam War. And my concern about this emphasis on safety is the wider social implications. If you look at any ancient culture across the world, Native American, Celtic, African tribes, the Greeks and the Romans, and many others, there is a commonality in that risk-taking was an essential aspect of a coming-of-age ritual, particularly for young men. You cannot be fully a man if you are unwilling to take risks. And of course, learning about risk and judging what are sensible risks, what are not sensible risks, is an important part of growing up and coming to maturity. So being able to evaluate risk yourself is so very important as part of human development. And of course, we admire risk takers as part of culture. We all love the hero, and if you look at most Hollywood movies, what do we have? We have a hero, somebody who takes risks, fighting with the baddies, with dragons, monsters, etc. They are the people that put themselves within danger. So, socially, it's something which we embrace, or historically have embraced and admired, but now this is being quashed and subdued. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating unnecessary risk-taking, but rather I'm highlighting the stifling effect of risk aversion. This is important both from an individual perspective, individual development and mental health, but also from a wider social perspective. So, for the individual, a life restricted by fear and risk aversion and a constant need for safety is a life unlived, literally a life unlived. Existing and living are not the same thing. You need to be able to assess and take risks in order to be fully alive and fully experience life. From a wider social perspective, it's even more insidious, and this is something that I was trying to hint at in my video on helmets, where the helmet should be compulsory, but I'm going to say it more explicitly here. From a wider social perspective, we've seen quite clearly how people who live in fear and concerned with their own safety are willing to give up their own freedoms for what they perceive to be increased safety. And anyone with even a basic grasp of history can recognise that this is the route to tyranny and oppression. Tyrants suppress and control populations by propagating fear and then offering perceived safety in the place of freedom, as a substitute for freedom. So this is just so very, very important. And I have to say, this increased obsession with safety is not just restricted to younger riders. I see it amongst older riders, riders of my own age and older, who are being socially conditioned into this fear and need to increase their own safety. So, just want to reiterate, I am not advocating senseless risk taking, and nor am I knocking the developments that we see in safety both in motorcycles and in clothing. I'm just making this broader social comment, and I say that an obsession with safety is unhealthy both from an individual perspective and from a wider social perspective. So many thanks for listening. I hope you found this interesting and perhaps thought-provoking. I would love to hear your thoughts on the subject. What do you feel about these social attitudes towards risk-taking, and particularly how it applies to motorcycling these days? Okay, ride safe. See you again soon. Bye.